Hi, welcome back to Tea Time in Olympia. I'm Lucas Miller, and today I have with me Anna Pike, who has recently returned from Standing Rock Reservation and is going to tell us a little bit about that experience and some things about her new project, gardening in Olympia. What's the name of your project?
Olympia Garden Swap.
Okay. So to begin with, just give us a little bit about your background. I understand you're a veteran.
That's correct. I did about 6 years in the United States Air Force. I was a 1-0 intelligence analyst, and yeah, it was a good run for a career. But eventually, I did get out as a conscientious objector. So that's why I took such interest in Veterans Stand for Standing Rock in the first place, because I got out of the military because I went in with good intentions, but what I saw was I was just only contributing to global suffering. And I mean, because realistically, if war brought peace, we'd be a very peaceful world, let's face it.
Right.
And so eventually, yeah, I just kind of departed that. And eventually, when I saw the call for veterans to go to Standing Rock, I couldn't resist. I mean, that's, I left the military so I wouldn't have to fight anymore, but that was a fight that I couldn't sit out.
So I understand you were not out when you were in the military.
That's correct.
Yeah.
When I enlisted, actually, not only was there Don't Ask, Don't Tell, but there was an active ban on transgender people serving. So, in a sense, both gender and sexuality, I was in the closet in the military.
Did that contribute to your decision to leave?
No, actually, surprisingly not. I was willing to stick it out because the whole, I mean, the sexuality part, it was becoming more okay in the military because they repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell. But as far as the transition piece, like I kind of knew near the end what was going on with myself, but I thought I could keep the trans genie in the bottle for, as long as I wanted to, and that was the goal. But of course, then, my pesky morals got in the way.
Well, of course.
Not to judge other people that are military members, but I'm just saying for me personally, in my personal experience, it just didn't feel quite right. So.
So you're coming out and you're starting your transition process. That all came after you.
That's
left.
correct. Yeah. So I mean. I just had an ordinary military career like many other service members. I mean, first deployment was to Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan, then the next one ended up going to Baghdad, Iraq, then a year in Seoul, Korea, and kind of been all over the place. But while I was in, I enjoyed what I did. I mean, I was good at it, but just the longer things went on, I just saw that, wow, I wanted to make a difference in a good way.
Right.
But from what I was seeing unfolding in the, it's just I clearly was not fulfilling that mission to myself.
Sure.
I mean, we can talk all day just on the politics of
both
wars and how we kind of, as a country, I think we're responsible. We kind of created the problem in the first place. So.
Yeah. Do you feel like you've been able to accomplish more as a veteran than you were when you were still in the service?
Well, I mean, certainly there was probably more opportunity in the military, but realistically, I don't get to choose where I go or what I fight for.
Right.
So as a veteran, though, I feel like I can get myself involved and I can pick my battle, if you will.
Yeah.
I can go out there and I can select, what I want to be a part of and what I don't want to be a part of. And so. Yeah.
So you recently chose to be a part of the protests at Standing Rock Reservation.
That's correct.
Can you tell us a little bit what led you there and who did you meet?
Well, when I first saw the call, I was just like, they were only looking originally for I think it was about 500 veterans is what the original plan was. But and I signed on as soon as I saw it, and it was just like days later they closed the list because they had thousands of veterans that were wanting to go. Yeah. And I was just like, this is history. I mean, this is a chance to actually fight a good fight and actually do something good with my my skill sets. And so it was a natural fit for me. Not only can I stand up for people who need it, and then honestly, I'm standing up for the world as we know it. Because I mean, last thing we realistically need to be doing is developing fossil fuels. So not only was I standing up for the rights of the people in that area and protect a lot of people like to call the people who participated protesters, but actually that's not what people that went there should be called. the common terminology would be water protectors.
For those who don't know too much about Standing Rock, as I understand it, the issue is the residents of the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation do not want a pipeline being built across their water supply.
Well, who would?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, it's
and actually
yeah.
that wasn't even the original site. It actually got moved. There's actually a pretty complex timeline to the whole thing, but in all reality, though, this pipeline. I mean, it's not a matter if pipelines will leak; it's a matter of when.
Sure.
And with that river system, if that leaked, that'd be devastating for a huge
danger to
region.
their water supply, isn't it?
Oh, and for a significant portion of the country, arguably, depending, of course, on the size of the leak. But at the end of the day, pipes could be 100% safe. Bottom line is we do not need to be developing fossil fuels anymore.
Sure.
We should be weaning ourselves off of them and not exploring more options. So,
I mean, I've heard it said that this particular pipeline project, it brings into question native rights treaties, and also the issues about more vulnerable groups of people being basically exploited by the fossil fuel industry.
Well, I mean, look at the whole Bundy occupation in Oregon. When that was all said and done, I mean, people were actually killed, during that ordeal. But people were no charges and they were just let off and, have a nice day, it's over. But you look at a lot of the water protectors, what they've had to deal with, like before I got there.
Right.
And honestly, I should thank you again for covering this topic, because our media nationally has done a really poor job of actually covering Standing Rock. And I think that's some people are starting to point that out. And so I think the media's kind of done a little bit better of a job at following it. But
well, that's why it's good to hear from someone who has actually been there, seen what's going on. So tell us a little bit about what you encountered when you went there. Did you go as a group of veterans, or?
What we did is, because they had to mobilize, the plan was to mobilize over 2,000 veterans in a very short period of time, relatively. And so, like, the original plan was they wanted to have everybody get into, like, cargo vans and pack up and go. Then they realized the logistics of that wasn't really a good idea, because there's liability and sort of the other things. So what they ended up doing is getting charter buses, and they had regions where they had different charter buses, and people would rendezvous with those buses and bus across the country to North Dakota. And so I ended up leaving Olympia, and it was round trip, just bus alone. Round trip was about 65 hours to get there.
Wow.
I mean, we had dealt with, it was crazy weather along the way and mountain passes But yeah, once we got in the bus, and I was supposed to be fulfilling the role as like a J2 intelligence person, so doing open source intelligence work, looking what the media is saying or what they're not saying, and kind of keep our movement informed and hopefully out of trouble. And so yeah, that was my role, and that's what I was supposed to be doing. I was also a regional transportation leader, so I was also, for this particular area, helping to mobilize veterans and get them ready to get on the bus and go.
Okay.
And so, I mean, it's pretty bumpy, the whole thing, just because it was being done so quickly and it was done with volunteers. So trying to coordinate this national effort was, it was no small undertaking, to say the least. But once I got out there, the unfortunate thing is it was very well intended, but the scope of it was so big that there were some things that fell through the cracks. So like when I got there at the camp, which is, I mean, the camp's not like, you're driving 5 minutes outside of Olympia and their city's right there. I mean, it's like in the middle of nowhere. There's like nothing really out there.
Yeah.
But once you pull up to the camp, the most amazing thing is how big it is.
Yeah.
And it's just unbelievable. And I have warned anybody goes there at night, don't walk at night by yourself, because it's so huge, you will get lost. But so when I got there, I mean, it was just we were kind of dropped off and didn't know what to do. So essentially we just kind of, said, okay, well, we just got to do what we have to do. So we set up tents and, got kitchens set up in tents and got equipment moved and helped unstuck a bunch of buses and cut firewood, and kind of got ourselves really, we were really preparing ourselves to embed in the camp. Because when we were setting up, like when I arrived there, a private security helicopter was just circling us, watching our every move. Because, they were like, who are these new people? Because they got wind that the veterans were coming.
Right.
And even the Army Corps engineers, like right when I got there, the Army Corps engineers said that they're going to back off on this, and hopefully the environmental assessment we push forward, that'll, you know, put a more, I guess you could say, realistic spin on this whole thing and how we need to stay away from doing this for many reasons. But
Yeah. So I'm curious to know, were there many other trans people involved in your group or just in general, and how were you received by your fellow activists?
well, and that's the one thing I was kind of concerned about is how would I be received. But what was, I mean, it was a delightful surprise that I had absolutely no issue while I was there. And even I tried to, I even heard that there was a Two-Spirit tent there for the Two-Spirit community. I really wanted to check that out, but like I said, I wandered around the camp for about 2 hours lost and never found it. So, so in general, though, none of the service members, the other veterans had a problem. At least, not that I heard. Also, our hosts there, and I mean, it was just, it was seamless and everything I could have hoped for, really, in that regard.
Yeah. So what else did you do while you were? How long were you at Standing Rock?
Well, I mean, I was there for just a few days, but I mean, it was actually, I'd say most of the, like about a week that I was gone, most of it was on the road getting to and from.
Right.
But the few days I was there, I did my best to try to fulfill my duties, for what I volunteered for, but it was complicated because, like, one of the things that made doing like my particular job difficult is you had to be mindful of how you use electronic devices, because there was, based on what I've seen, what others reported, there was electronic warfare going on. Like, some people would complain that like all their apps would activate in their phone, their batteries would drain, and their phones would power down. And I know mine like had all sorts of things where it would just power down and not work anymore, or messages wouldn't send. So I mean, I'm not the only person.
So like a form of sabotage, really.
I don't know if I'd call it sabotage, but I mean, it could be dangerous because I mean, we were in like blizzard at one point in the, we were there. We were in blizzard-like conditions,
right?
And interfering with cell phone communications to me was a very dangerous thing to do because if people needed to call,
But the interference was being done deliberately to stop you getting information out, or? Well,
just monitoring. I mean, that was the big conversation on the camp was like, essentially operational security.
Okay.
Because they're like, we are well aware that there's infiltrators. I mean, there was actually an armed infiltrator that, and this is going off the news that I've heard and followed, but at one point, though, they had a person show up who was, in a truck off to the side, and everybody's like, what's with that person? So a few people walked over to investigate, and the person steps out with, what appeared to be like an M4 carbine, semi-automatic weapon. And that's when things kind of started escalating, but luckily the people there, the water protectors, talked to this person like, what's going on? And I guess in the exchange, the person indicated that they worked for Dakota Access Pipeline, supposedly, and the insurance paperwork for the truck was Dakota Access. And so, and seeing that kind of stuff really scared me because it's like, I mean, I didn't know what to expect when I was going to get there. I mean, I've heard stories, but when I started hearing about that kind of stuff, I'm like, so you have like an oil company that is supposedly sending these kinds of people in.
Yeah.
And that's scary. I mean, that could have went horribly, wrong very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you expect law enforcement or, government to be carrying weapons like that, but a private company, it's...
Well, but I mean, is it that much different than what we do in the Middle East, though, when we hire, like, Blackwater or Z or whatever they call themselves? Because that was the one thing I noticed. I mean, seriously, the whole time I was in the camp, it was like being back in the military. I mean... we had body armor and helmets and all that stuff being prepared because, I mean, there's water protectors that have been shot in the head with rubber bullets. One water protector almost lost their arm, and that's still being investigated as to what exactly happened. But there's a lot of indications to lead most people to believe that it was, some sort of like a kind of a crowd control explosive device, like a flashbang or something like that, that may have been fired inappropriately. And so, I mean, the threats are real. There's another person who partially lost eyesight because of all the, tear gas, and they were hosing people off and below freezing temperatures. And they even had a private security company, not when I was there, before I went there, that people were just casually walking these, working dogs around. The working dogs were biting people to the point that they had blood dripping from their mouths.
Wow.
Yeah.
Huh. And all this was being done by
Well, that's the
local
thing.
law enforcement, or
Well, the sheriff's department was there, but a lot of this private security stuff, it's like
Oh, okay.
who really knows who's funding them? But one can assume
Yeah.
it's more than likely, probably, the oil company, maybe.
right?
But
Yeah.
I mean, because they were literally losing millions of dollars a day that this project wasn't advancing.
Right.
So they had an interest, and
Sure.
yeah, they made it known. I mean, you could see the law enforcement compound surrounded by, big, huge, watch lights and what appeared to be razor wire, and it was just like being deployed. It was pretty intense, to say the least.
Yeah. And of course, the people there, the water protectors, are, peaceful.
Yeah, it's a peace, and that was a big thing from the start. Is it was a peace. We're all there on a peaceful mission. No one's to bring weapons or drugs of any kind except prescription pharmaceuticals. But yeah, they wanted to make it very clear that if anybody breaks these rules, you're going to make us all look bad. So they were very strict about that, and that's why they approached that person and wanted to find out what they were up to, because it's not uncommon for infiltrators to go into a cause and stir up trouble behind the lines. It's not unusual.
Yeah. What did you observe about your fellow activists and water protectors? Was it like a fairly broad spectrum of people?
Yeah, I mean, I met people from all sorts of walks of life, from all sorts of different places in the country, and it was just. But what was really, I think, refreshing though is because a lot of veterans nowadays kind of feel that in some ways they've been kind of left behind or forgotten.
Sure. Yeah.
And so, but this was like a way to, and also they might feel a little. I'm not going to necessarily say resentful, but because we know a lot of these wars nowadays are just ghastly money pits and humanitarian crises and human rights abuses, just one after another.
Yeah.
So really, a lot of these people got a chance to go and stand up for something that really deserved it. I mean, there's in my book there was nothing more legitimate than this cause. I mean, like I said, for the people that live in the region and for people that live on this planet, frankly.
So you were there for a few days. When you left, did you feel like you had accomplished what you went there to do?
Well, I mean, when I was there, because like I said, when I got there, pretty quickly Army Corps of Engineers kind of backed off, and there was some difficulties connecting with a lot of the people I was supposed to work with. But at the same coin, though, I got a chance to, one tent, we got into this cluster of military tents one night. Every night I slept in a different place. It was insane. But this one night I was in this tent just packed full of people, and it was about maybe 5 military tents. And this was the night that, or the day of, I should say, the day we did the actual bridge walk, where thousands of veterans just took and marched up to the line. And I tried to get up to the front line, but I couldn't get. I was like 60 feet back. It was just an ocean of people.
Wow.
Veterans, allies, indigenous, everybody standing together.
Yeah.
And you could see, I mean, I think there was people came from as far as South America.
Wow.
To, because you had the Belamonte Dam down there.
Sure, yeah.
So, I mean, that's a whole nother, water crisis right there. But
Yeah.
so it was absolutely amazing to see everybody just, braving out. I mean, it was scary weather. Like even that day is when the blizzard started blowing in. And before we knew it, when we were on the bridge, it was turning into a whiteout. And so I started walking back to, our tent, because I'm like, okay, I want to kind of, I've done what I need to do, but this is starting to get a little serious.
Yeah.
Before we knew it, you had a full blizzard with, I think the winds were peaked out at about 50 miles an hour.
Wow.
And the whole night laying in the tent, these tents are just shaking and, blowing around all night. And I'm like, I approached our tent leader. I'm like, we should probably get everybody in their, winter gear and kind of ready to go in case we lose a tent. And at first everybody's like, no, that's not going to happen. Then they're like, the tent started really shaking. They're like, let's do it to be safe. And everybody was mad about it because who wanted to sleep in their, parkas and everything.
Right.
And it was like, I think it was like 1:30 in the morning. I'm just laying there, just listening to this tent. It was so noisy you could barely even hear yourself think. And also people ran in, saying they needed help and grabbed fire extinguishers. And so everybody kind of amassed and ran out. And it turns out one of the tents that was actually taking the brunt of the wind actually got uprooted. So all the people that were sleeping in that tent had to scatter and find new places to stay in this blizzard.
Wow.
We had to push like a wood stove out the front door so it didn't burn the rest of the tents down. And this is all wild. It was like a sandstorm with ice everywhere.
Yeah, so I take it that probably detracted a little bit from the amount of actual activism you were able to do dealing with those adverse conditions.
Oh, you're absolutely right, because it turned into the point, we were there and it was awesome to be there doing this, but then it was quickly turning into a humanitarian crisis in its own way, because, we already had to do search and rescue for people getting lost in the camp, and, they'd turn up elsewhere, and so we had this blizzard. It was a whole new ball game, because, we were there concerned about the safety due to like law enforcement in the area and infiltrators, and now we had Mother Nature turning on us a little bit. And it was like nothing I've ever been in, but it was one of those things though. I was happy to go there, but it was definitely, I think after I got home from that week, I was pretty much dead for about like 3 weeks, but I'm definitely ready to go back out again. There's talks of sending veterans to Flint, Michigan to address that water crisis out there.
Oh, wow, yeah.
So, but yeah, it was,
maybe when the weather's better.
I don't know. I can't remember the exact timeline what they were thinking about doing, but it was going to be, it's going to take place, I think, if it still is. I haven't looked lately, but if it still is, it's going to be during the colder time, but didn't stop us in Standing Rock, and it won't stop us in Flint, Michigan.
Well,
so
good.
hopefully that mission will be a go.
Yeah.
But when I was standing at the front line doing the Veterans March, one thing that was pretty eerie was like as the snow began to fall and it was getting harder, like how far you could see was shrinking very quickly.
Right.
The one thing you could hear constantly was this little buzzing sound whirring all around. And I looked up when I was standing there, and I could see one of the law enforcement drones like literally buzzing overhead, just watching us, monitoring us, and circling our crowd.
Right.
And I think that's one thing that's kind of I anticipated that the drone movement in this country would be interesting to say the least, but to be there as a water protector standing up for something like this and having drones buzz over me like I'm some kind of terrorist or something like that, that was pretty unnerving. Especially being an honorably discharged combat veteran. So but just seeing like technology that you would commonly find in the battlefield being employed against our own citizenry, if that's not alarming, I don't know what is.
Yeah, a drone is basically like a surveillance device.
Well,
right?
that's what these were used for. Both sides had drones. I know from there was drone footage from pilots from our camp that were flying around them, and they were flying around us. But that's the one thing that's they were it was all peaceful, but still, it's like really interesting to actually see these like devices being actually used against us in this way.
Yeah,
drones can be used for a lot of good things, but at this point, I was just like, I remember just standing there just watching this. I'm like, I just couldn't. It was so surreal. Just taking it in and being like, wow, like,
that's a technology that should be used, for
the
protection of citizens.
Well, and it is for a lot of times. They're used in like car crash forensics and fighting forest fires and search and rescues, all sorts of good things. But and that's what like troubled me was to see a lot of technology that could be used for good being used to try to squash the water protectors. There was even mine-resistant ambush vehicles. I didn't see it when I was there, but previous reporting, a lot of the images. Some of the most famous images from Standing Rock, you could see military-grade trucks lined up, and there's all sorts. There's footage of like law enforcement officers clubbing, water protectors, and the amount of I've never seen that much pepper spray employed in my own life. As I have seen at Standing Rock, through personal experience and also the media in general.
Yeah, well, as you say, the militarization of civilian police forces in this country is, it's a direction that I've heard a lot of police officers and former police officers say is really not the direction we should be going in.
No, it might sound extreme, but it's really the road to fascism. Yeah. It really is. Yeah. Especially when you have a citizenry that is not equally, prepared.
Right.
It's like, at what point could this, this, I guess you could say, is like tool of protection or whatever you want to call it, how quickly can that be turned against us? And and I guess that was the point I was trying to make, is I was actually experiencing this technology being turned on us.
Right.
I'm like, wow, I've seen these vehicles in Iraq, and it's just like, even the guidance actually from Veterans Stand for Standing Rock on their page was advising us to bring body armor and helmets and gas masks, and it's like they were actually advising us to bring that kind of stuff. And I'm like, I mean, when I was packing all my bags, I was like, I feel like I'm getting ready for a deployment to a combat zone.
Right.
And I think that one of the things that got me the most was...
Well, you kind of were.
Well, and that was my point. It's like, I am going on a combat deployment in my own country, is what it felt like.
Yeah.
So it was like being in the military all over again.
Right.
I mean, again, this is a fight that I was happy to go and do, but still on the other side of the coin, I'm just like, never in my day did I ever think that I'd have to, don some of the gear that I wore in a combat zone to stand up for, people that are being marginalized by a very oppressive system. And they have been for centuries.
Yeah.
And it's like, let's start honoring our treaties. Let's start taking care of our planet. Let's start treating each other with dignity and respect. I mean...
Yeah. So I gather that there is some question, some legal issue concerning a treaty and the actual legal rights of
the
Lakota Nation to that.
Well, part
land.
of some of these treaties, the one I hear most commonly referred to was, I want to say it was like 1854, but it was a valid treaty and it was signed,
Right.
And that's one of the things that has repeated itself through history is, stuff gets taken away from the indigenous peoples. They're like, well, here's your treaty, you get to stay here. Then all of a sudden they might find gold or oil or something. Oh no, then they move people or shrink their, land or... Yeah. And I think really what you've seen is, people are like, enough is enough. Centuries of oppression has finally caught up to the system. Yeah. I mean, that was the one thing too, even, and this is what was told me when I got there, there were a lot of tribes there that, used to not like each other, but have united over this issue and are working together.
Well, you would think, yeah.
That's where, just like they're in a fight for our lives, I think all of the citizenry should really start working more together because, I think we're going to have to. I think our future depends on it, especially people in the LGBT community. Because, because there is a lot of infighting, even in our community. There's a lot of disagreements over many different issues. Yeah. But with, even transgender people are just they're not fully protected in this country. It's not, it's not a national, universal, we're very fortunate and privileged to live where we live. But there's a lot of other people that aren't, and I think that's where, thinking locally is good, but we also need to look out for our,
Yeah, that's what's the old expression? Think globally, act locally.
Yeah, I think that's very appropriate.
Yeah. It seems to me that the part of the difficulty with civilian police now is that there's confusion about whose side they're actually on because, the lines are different now than they were in the past, and it's becoming clear that, law enforcement exists really more to protect private property and profit-motivated corporations and not so much individual citizens.
Well, the police forces, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they got their start pretty much chasing down and capturing, runaway slaves. Yeah. So, I'm not saying that's what they do today, but, an organization that starts out that way, like I said, I have friends that are, law enforcement officers.
But, they're still doing the same thing as protecting private property rights.
Well, exactly. And that's where, that's the one, I think, the biggest takeaway for me was just like how much this country has really changed. And I think, Standing Rock as a whole.
And how much it hasn't changed.
Yeah, and that's true, and how much it hasn't. Yeah. But and just actually witnessing the lack of media reporting, because like when I was there, right when I was leaving is when the major media outlets were coming in. like when I was there, really wasn't a whole lot of people still. I mean, I think it was like HBO Vice was there. I bumped into them. I know the Young Turks were already there.
Right.
And but really, a lot of people still were. I mean, like I said, it took someone nearly getting their arm blown off to make
bring in the mainstream
to
media.
bring in the mainstream media. Before that, nobody really cared. You know, or at least I shouldn't. I mean, few people. I mean, either that or people just weren't informed about it.
Right. Right.
And that's where I mean, I'm glad it's getting out there. But I mean, that's unfortunately not over though. I mean, like I said, the Army Corps of Engineers, they backed off. They're kind of, backing off on their previous position, but
Out of respect for the veterans who were there.
well,
you
and I
think?
wouldn't say out of respect for the veterans, but I think the veterans showing up scared. They're like, ooh, I think that was that was something they didn't want to deal with, and I think
Right. Okay.
that was the whole point, is having our veterans go out there and
Yeah.
stand up for this whole thing. But it's just. It scared them straight a little bit, but it didn't. I mean, it didn't scare the oil company. They said they're going to proceed as planned, and so we'll see how well that works. But I mean, the veterans aren't going away, though. I mean, if we need to come back, I'm sure more than plenty of us will do so.
Yeah. How did you find the morale of just the water protectors in general when you were there? Did they seem to feel like?
The mood was very good because, like I said, once I got there, pretty much was when the news dropped that the Army Corps of Engineers are backing off. So the mood in the camp at that time was very, very good.
Right.
But even for me, though, it was really hard to be happy about it because I know for a fact that these oil companies don't back off easily. They don't, they won't walk away without a fight.
Yeah.
I don't think, I mean, this whole thing is far from
yeah.
over. And there's actually a pipeline, a similar situation going on in Texas and other parts of the country.
Well, sure. Yeah.
I mean, because, really, the Dakota Access Pipeline is just like another Keystone XL.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to build more. I mean, unfortunately, that's what I'm afraid of. With this new administration, we're going to see further oil development.
Yeah, most likely.
And with that, I mean, you're going to be infringing on, people who own the land, and I don't think they're going to care. I mean, clearly they didn't care in this case.
Yeah.
I mean, and they actually even relocated this pipeline closer to this very controversial spot because other people didn't want it in their backyard.
Well, of course, yeah.
I mean, that's a mentality that needs to go. Is not my backyard. It's like, well,
Yeah. It's everybody's backyard.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like people arguing over like, their rooms in the Titanic. Well, mine's still dry, and it's like, well, yours might be dry now, but yeah.
Yeah.
It's like.
Yeah, but I mean, that's, again, it's kind of part of the set of tactics, taking advantage of the people who can most easily be exploited or pushed aside.
But I'll tell you, this time though, I think this is a huge, huge change in the status quo though, with Standing Rock, because once it started getting media attention, and especially once the veterans started getting involved, that's when people really started taking notice.
Right.
And I think the fact that in this case, when we mobilized over 2,000 veterans in a relatively short period of time and did this, I think that sends a message that, hey, we will respond to these kinds of incidences. We're not going to take this anymore.
Right.
Because I know, I'm not going to speak for all veterans, but I know when I joined, I wanted to go out, I wanted to do something that would help people,
Right.
That would be beneficial to humanity, get us closer to, reaching to the stars someday, hopefully. That is, unless we blow ourselves up,
Wow.
But I forgot where I was going with this, but anyways, yeah.
But as a veteran, you wanted to.
Well, yeah, I wanted to go and actually just fight the good fight. Because like I said, when I was in the military, I mean, what was it? I think in the Iraq War alone, we killed over 1 million Iraqis, and we can't even count them. There's so many people we killed. We can't even count the people we killed.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is not sustainable. We can't continue to live like this. I mean, life on this planet is going to be already hard enough as it is in the years to come.
Right.
Whether you're talking, socioeconomics, climate change, disease. We have a huge uptick in, antibiotic-resistant bacteria.
Yep.
So, with all these challenges ahead, why are we wasting so much of our time, energy, resources, and person power on fighting each other when we could be really fighting the issues that are really, at the root of what makes our day miserable and unlivable? But hopefully humanity will learn before it makes the same mistake yet again.
So how have you found your trans activism and other forms of activism integrating or combining just in your day-to-day life? Do you find that there's a big like split between different issues? Do you feel like there's kind of a compartmentalization, or have you been able to sort of bring all of that together?
Well, I've experienced kind of like, well, with Standing Rock, for example.
Yeah.
And there's some overlap though, because like with my business, Transcendent Education Systems, providing the transgender cultural competency, sensory training, consulting services,
Right.
I was able to actually, when I was at Standing Rock, be a, kind of like, I don't like this phrase, but kind of an ambassador for the community.
Okay.
Because most people had no idea about, they've never knowingly met a trans person before. So when I was at Standing Rock on the bus, we had many hours to talk and get to know each other. So I got to inform a lot of people, and I told people that, hey, consider me a safe space. You can ask me questions, and
Right.
I'll let you know if you shouldn't ask those questions, but I'll answer anyways, just so you can further your understanding. But so there's a little bit of overlap there. Like I said, I really wanted to get to the Two-Spirit tent, but that was after a couple hours of wandering in the dark, that knew it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah. Did you find that people were surprised to see that trans people were interested in the Standing Rock issue, or?
Not so much that, but I think when I would go into statistics, like, to tell people like, hey, did you know that 135,000 U.S. military veterans are transgender? Their jaws are dropped. They're like, there's that many? It's like, yes, we're everywhere, and that's just, people identified themselves. There's probably, I would argue, probably a lot more, but we won't know until, more statistical data comes out. But I mean, most people, it was well received, and most people were very receptive to the information. And, I was kind of, like I said, I was worried about what I would encounter there, but it way exceeded my standard. I was very happy.
Did you see a lot of other trans people there? Or were you kind of...
When I was there, I didn't really see a lot of other trans people, but then again, it's kind of hard to tell, though, when you're, like, wearing, like, cold weather gear balaclavas and everything like that.
You're in a camp big enough to get lost in, I guess.
Exactly,
Yes.
but I mean, there was an LGBT presence there in general, but I mean, everybody was welcome, and that was the one thing on the camp that I saw that I really did like is people were working together. They had to. I mean, just like when that tent started blowing over, we all had to work together to rectify that issue. And oh no, we didn't have a camp cook, and so I volunteered to be the camp cook. I was like the Neelix of the tent, doing morale and cooking. So it was really nice. It was refreshing because people were coming together, and I think that's what's going to happen though with our hard times that we're in right now. Is at least I'm hoping that's what happens, is people come and work more collaboratively and work together, and because it's like,
I think that's what it's going to take. People who are basically heading in the same progressive direction, are going to need to make these, cross-community alliances. We're going to have to become that patchwork majority, that's big enough to overcome some of these issues.
Yeah, and working more close with these groups too, we can realize, some of their history, where they're coming from, and realize, like, I mean, just hearing a lot of different perspectives when I was there on, what happened to, as far as colonialism in America, and just hearing a lot of that, it was very eye-opening.
Yeah.
I mean, I had taken history classes in the past, but to hear it in that format though was a totally different experience.
Yeah.
So that's where, I mean, when people actually make the effort to go work with people, even people they don't understand, or it's just they have that desire to understand, get to know. And I think when you participate in these kinds of movements, you learn about people in a way that you can't replicate that anywhere.
Yeah.
No amount of Google searching or skipping through textbooks, could have taught me what I learned at Standing Rock. And that's an experience I'm going to take with me for the rest of my life, and hopefully take that attitude and show people, hey, let's get to know each other. It's like, that's why, like, even a lot of people that are transphobic even, I think some of them, if they just got to know us more as people, and not just, a gender expression or anything like that, if they actually got to know us as people and they, took the time to hear us out, I think a lot of people might change their views, but you got to counter, years, decades worth of, social programming.
Sure.
And we know this society has not been very kind to LGBT people in general, especially in the media. But
but for the ones who can be educated,
and for those
that's why it's so important to hear, people's stories, from, all kinds of experience.
Well, and that's why I advocated, and when I was there at Standing Rock, telling people about, this is who I am and this is what I'm about, and to kind of break this, I like to call it like being a stereotype crusher, basically. Because people are like, oh, it's like, wow, going out and doing this kind of thing, and hopefully even for those people that don't want to understand, it's kind of hard to, because that's the one thing. If there's one thing that drives me the most nuts, is when like there's a bunch of people out there that will, all day long, support the troops, support the troops, support the troops. But as soon as like LGB and especially TEAC, comes into the scene, there, and some of those people will hate on those people, and
like,
it's
accept those troops.
Well, right, that's the thing. It's like, okay, so I'm going to support the troops except for the ones that are, LGBT. And it's like, well, no, it's kind of a package deal, and that's why I go out. That's not the main reason I go out and do these things, but while I'm doing these, that's why I advocate as a trans person and make it known this is who I am. I mean, there were certain times and places in the journey to Standing Rock that I kept it to myself, but mainly I put it out there for everybody, and I think a lot of people walked away with a lot more knowledge and understanding that hopefully will pay dividends, and hopefully they'll pay it forward.
Well, hopefully our viewers will benefit from hearing your story firsthand.
I hope so. And like I said, I encourage people to make sure they keep following Standing Rock, and all the other similar causes that are trailing behind it, because the fight's not over. It's still on. I mean, we got past this point, but I would almost argue it's going to get much harder. Because, where is this current administration going to go? I mean, they're supporting...
Well, and of course, many more fights are going to follow.
Well, especially with the encouragement of oil and gas and coal development in this country. It's going to get in other people's way, and at what point, are we going to have private security companies working on the, behalf of the oil companies, policing the citizenry? Where's this going to end? I don't know, but I mean, we got to keep up a good fight, though. Can't afford not to.
So, since you've gotten back, have you noticed any difference in the way that the situation is being reported, or?
I mean, there's marginally more reporting by mainstream media, but again, though, I mean, you look how many look at how many media outlets we have in this country. There's not many of them left. I think there's less than half a dozen. So when you have mainstream media who's kind of owned by corporate interests, they're going to report accordingly. So there's alternative media though that a lot of people don't know about, like the Young Turks, for example. They provided some of the earliest reporting. Before it was when the police were spraying people with water below freezing and the person almost had their arm blown off. Like the Young Turks were covering it before all that happened. So, I mean, there is hope that people won't forget about it, but I don't know. I mean, we have so many problems in this country right now that it's hard to focus on every single crisis and remember them all.
Well, and it's probably going to get worse.
Unfortunately. I mean, my nickname in the military was Bad News Bear, and based on what I've seen, I mean, just in the political arena alone, we have a lot to be concerned about, to say the least. I mean, pick your poison. There's a lot to be worried about, a lot to be concerned.
So your most recent project has to do with food security and sustainability. Is that
so? Part of I'm finishing up my degree at Evergreen State College. So one of my projects I'm doing is going to be a gardening-based project for my student-originated studies program. And so I started up a Facebook page called Olympia Garden Swap. And that's a place where gardeners can connect, socialize, collaborate, share, buy, sell, trade, garden items, including produce. Because really, one of the things that I think we need to face as a country, and part of what we're talking about, how, rocky the political scene is.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at climate change, you look at, I mean, our national debt is, I mean, if you were to take every known dollar in existence and put it towards national debt, you know, you'd still have debt left over, you know. So it's like one of the things that, you know, I think is really important is building communities and health through gardens, because we don't have control over our economy. You know, we have so much control over our political system. One thing we can do, though, is ensure our food security, which pays dividends in multiple ways. I mean, you know, if we have like they're talking about repealing the Affordable Care Act, you know, it's health insurance is going to rise. Well, behooves people to, you know, better nutrition and get more exercises. I mean, there's so many ways that gardens can benefit, and that's why I'm standing this page up, is to connect with like-minded people and coordinate production. Because I know there's like, you know, a lot of the overstock from the garden, you know, once, you know, we feed ourselves, we hopefully can cover a little bit by selling, you know, some of our expenses by selling, you know, some of the crop. What we'd like to do is take the extra that we have left over and ideally donate it to, like, for example, like the local food bank, or give it to one of the organizations. I've heard there's a couple few that provide homeless of Olympia with hot food. So what I'd like to do is, you know, connect with organizations like that and other people, coordinate our production, and hopefully, you know, give people good, tasty, fresh, nutritious food.
So your project is basically, it's in the form of a Facebook page
That's
right now?
That's part of it.
Then...
I mean, there's more to it than that.
Okay.
But the gardening project, that's just one part of the gardening project as a whole.
Okay.
I know through misfortune, I found good fortune recently, because I had to move out of one house into another. And this new house we're in is about 1/3 of an acre. And so I'm finally going to get a chance to act on one of my longtime dreams and start like a small-scale micro farm. And so part of my project I'm going to be doing is exploring new sustainable gardening techniques. So we're going to be doing like, for example, we're going to be using straw bale gardening versus doing like in the ground, because in the ground farming, especially in what we're doing, is going to require a lot more energy, a lot more chemicals, and a lot more time. But straw bales, though, you can actually process them in such a way where you compost the centers out, and you can grow out of the centers of them, off the sides of the bales, and you have an added benefit is at the end of your growing season, you can scoop all that up, put it into your compost maker, and have fresh compost the next season. So, you know, I've never gardened that way until now, so that's where, you know, with this SOS class, I'm going to be exploring that gardening technique. Also other vertical gardening techniques.
Right.
You know, so, you know, I'm not going to get into aquaponics this year, but maybe next year.
Are you ultimately thinking about like getting a larger piece of land to work
Eventually.
with? Or,
I mean, that's the goal, because like right now I'm in a rental, so that's another added benefit with doing straw bale too, is I'm in a rental, so that way I don't have to really scar up the land and everything. But eventually, that's what I would love to do. I'd love to do a sustainable eco-village, you know, with like-minded people and you know, have a common cause and work together. And 'cause, I mean, really, I think that's what's gonna happen in the future. I think we're really going to have to go from a nationalist perspective down to more local communities.
Yeah, and we're especially going to need to explore new agricultural methods.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, if the effects of climate change continue,
absolutely.
Our growing and settlement patterns have to change pretty radically.
Well, and and I think part of that, you know, we've sprawled out all over the landscape, but yet there's only certain areas that really produce the bulk of the food in this country. I mean, most people don't realize when you get produce from the other side of the country, it has a carbon price tag on it.
Right.
You know, it's like, you know, if you can't, and you'd be amazed at how much food you can grow in a relatively small amount of space. You know, not everybody needs to be a full-up farm, but I think if everybody supplemented, you know, their food with stuff they grew at home, that could only decrease the carbon footprint, which is, you know, beneficial for everybody.
So, just out of curiosity, for people like me who can't even keep a plastic flower alive, is there a place like that people like us can kind of fit in, who don't really maybe have the talent for growing things, but could contribute to a sustainable food system?
Oh, absolutely.
You know, in some other way?
Well, it kind of depends where you live, because, like, for example, like where I used to live in the Upper East Side neighborhood, there was the Bigelow Garden there, and it was a community garden, you know, not in the sense where there was individual plots. It was one big plot that, you know, the common worked on.
Right.
And their idea was, they wanted people living within, I can't remember what it was. This is just a guess. But it was like a couple miles away because they wanted people to walk or bike there. They didn't want people driving because sustainability was one big important cornerstone to that whole garden.
Right.
So, I mean, there's community gardens you can get involved in like that. There's organizations. I think one local organization people get involved in is Grub. And, there's all sorts of different avenues people can get involved in various levels. But it's just what's in your community, what's available. And, but yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of chances. I mean, that's another thing, too, is straw bale gardening the way I am, too. Well, it's also accessible for a lot of people in the sense that, some people, can't, get so low and get into the dirt. But with, straw bales, it's almost like a raised bed. So, I'm inviting friends to help with my garden, but hopefully through Olympia Garden Swap, if other people like, hey, I would love to do this in my backyard, but I don't know how to do it, hopefully they can, connect with people that know how to do it and are happy to come over and share their knowledge and expertise. Okay. So that's a big thing, because social media really, if you look what's going on in this country right now, just with politics. I mean, social media has played a huge role, mostly for better, some of it for worse. Yeah. But social media is really, you can't avoid it anymore. It's a big part of, connecting with humanity anymore. So it's like, bringing gardeners together. I mean, really, because gardeners, it's kind of hard to get us together. But hopefully, though, with this page, be able to find more of us and do some good.
So if people Google Olympia Garden Swap,
on Facebook.
Okay.
Yeah, and people are welcome to join. And
you have a URL that we can put at the bottom of our screen? I don't have
a URL, but just Olympia Garden Swap. It's the only one out there. And that's good for, and anybody's welcome to join from anywhere for, any peaceful reason.
All right.
But like I said, though, it's not just for people that necessarily garden. If people want to, if they are looking to buy locally produced food, they don't want to buy stuff that's imported from another state or trucked across the country, they can say, hey, if anybody's going to grow any shallots this year, I'd love to, buy some, or I'll trade you this or that for a bunch of shallots. And it's like, so it's kind of trying to make, I guess you could say, micro farming more available to everybody and give it a little bit more of a chance. Right. Because, I mean, even things like the farmers market isn't really accessible for all people, because it's kind of, I guess you could say relatively expensive to get a booth, and some people can't produce as much to fill a whole booth, and but this way, people can grow something small and they can have something to offer, So, but that's one thing I see all the time is a lot of people have overstock and they don't know what to do with a lot of their extra stuff. Yeah. I mean, I've seen like on the street corners boxes of zucchini saying free on it, and it's like. Yeah,
yeah, and it would be great if we could find ways to like donate that surplus to food banks or
absolutely,
homeless shelters, or ways to get food to the people who need it most desperately.
Well, exactly, and that's where hopefully through this page too is a lot of people that do make meals for our community, our homeless community of Olympia. If they want to hook up with us gardeners, and hopefully we can work out somewhere we can give our extra to them directly. That'd be amazing. That's that's what the goal of this whole project is to try to do things like that. So it's just right now being launched. The quarter is going to begin tomorrow for me, actually. So it's like the gates are open and I'm off to a running start, and we'll see where it goes.
Well, good. This is a very good goal. So as a trans person who's involved in a lot of issues that don't necessarily have to do specifically with being trans, how do you see trans activism and activism in general changing over the next 4 years?
Ooh, how do I see it changing over the next 4 years? I see it getting a lot more, I mean, hopefully I'm wrong, but I see it getting a lot more difficult, honestly. Because let's face it, you look at a lot of the cabinet picks for this new administration. Right. Not saying all of them, but there's a good portion of them that are, have history. Well, you say a history of racism, homophobia, transphobia, sexism, and that doesn't bode well for anybody. Because I mean, realistically, your society is only doing as well as its most vulnerable people are. Right. And you look in our community, just even our community alone, our most vulnerable people are not treated very well.
Yeah.
They get forgotten. I mean, it's out there. I mean, if you're looking, you can see it. It's all through the community. So I don't know. Honestly, I just see things getting a lot more difficult, but it just means we're going to have to double down on our efforts.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I don't know. I mean, I hate to say it, but yeah, I just see the difficulty ahead of me, even as like a advocate and activist on a few different fronts. There's some days it's really hard for me to swallow. I mean, I see what lay ahead. I mean, HB2, HB 1011, which is very similar to HB2.
Yeah.
The House Bill 1011 that's being introduced in our state even. I mean, everybody calls, our area like an oasis. It's like, oh, this is a safe place for us. But even that's under attack constantly.
Yeah.
So I kind of see it, we're going to have to not be complacent. It's like we're just, I think the challenges are only just beginning, unfortunately.
Do you see a potential for more alliances, like across different communities and different issues? Smaller communities coming together, despite differences to pursue common goals?
Well, honestly, I hope so. I would love to see more community collaboration, communities working, together. But unfortunately, I've seen even where, a lot of communities right now are just so upside down because of what has transpired, in this country over the past year and a half.
Right.
And I would love to see that. That's where, again, with the whole, gardening thing is, that's one thing everybody living has in common is food.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that could be like a great unifying force, it seems to me.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because really, realistically, like how well we are doing, like our health, our happiness, it's all interconnected.
Yeah.
A lot of people might think, well, what does my happiness have to do with somebody who's, so far from my life? How could that possibly impact me at all? But realistically, when you have people that are, that fall through the cracks of our system and get forgotten, look at a lot of our veterans. I'm not sure what the latest statistic is, but I know last time I heard it was like over 3 dozen veterans a day commit suicide in this country. Yeah. Arizona, there were dozens of veterans who died waiting in line for health care. And like when those things go on, how can that not affect us all?
Sure.
It should. It really should affect us all, but that's
well,
what
it does. And sometimes we don't always realize how much in the short term, but it does affect us.
It really does. So I'm just hoping that we can find a way ahead. And, that's where, there's a lot of things I don't have control over. And I know a lot of people right now feel very powerless and very helpless. Especially when you look how the election panned out in the first place. It's like who got the, popular vote, but then the Electoral College said, no, we're going this way instead.
Right.
A system that was originally designed to serve the people is really serving itself.
Yeah, true.
So it's like, we just got to kind of, take the helm and guide the ship ourselves and hopefully a much better course.
Absolutely. Okay, well, Anna Pike, thank you very much for talking to us today about Olympia Garden Swap and Standing Rock, and showing us that trans people are involved in a wide range of political issues. And thanks for being on the show.
Oh, you're very welcome. Happy to be here, and I appreciate you bringing attention to Standing Rock, because that has been one of the most underreported, humanitarian crises of our day, in this country at least. And I think people should be aware of how militarized our police forces have become and what they're doing out there. I'm not saying all cops are bad by any means, but when you look at, I implore people to Google and actually see what's been happening out there. Go to the Young Turks and actually see the reporting. They had reporters on the ground there, and I saw them there, and it's quite frightening.
Yeah.
Well,
it's good to have a report from the ground, as it were.
Oh yeah.
Because of course we don't always get the best information, and it's good to have that firsthand account. So thank you again.
Oh, you're very welcome.
And for Tea Time in Olympia, I'm Lucas Miller, and have a very good evening.